A Massachusetts wife and mom is now the subject of a frantic manhunt. Police say she may be armed and dangerous. New video just in of the final moments she was seen.
Looks like from the window we can see that there's much blood and a bathroom inside of the house.
What makes this case so shocking is not just that this woman is wanted for questioning in connection to the death of her husband and a Massachusetts police officer, but it's shocking considering who she is.
How would you ever get a tissue response for next year? Don't really think that side.
She is an author and longtime advocate for police officer mental health, but now law enforcement, they're after her.
It was a female. Her voicemail on her phone says it's Karen Solomon.
I'll also share with you some mysterious dispatch recordings that we found from when this manhunt first began. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. It's an understatement to say that people in Worcester, Massachusetts are shocked with this story that is unfolding right now. We actually found a quote from someone in response to this story who said that Karen Solomon is, quote, the kindest, sweetest woman on earth. But now she's being described by law enforcement as potentially armed and dangerous. So this is Karen Solomon. She's 58 years old, and this is the picture that police in Worcester, Massachusetts put out yesterday after they made a shocking discovery in her backyard around 5:30 in the morning. This is video that was just released of Solomon of the last time she was seen. It's like she's caught on some sort of Ring doorbell or garage surveillance video walking north from her house. And she seems calm. She's not frantic, which is shocking considering the case police want to speak with her about.
Can I get a Wildwood out, please, along with fire and EMS? Residents say that there's a male laid out in her backyard, unknown breathing.
So that's the first call that came in to Worcester Dispatch. A man was found unresponsive in the backyard of the home. Online records show that is where Karen Solomon lives, as well as her husband, Kurt Solomon, who we'll talk about here in just a moment. But I want to break down what we have learned about Karen Solomon and who she is.
When you're actively listening and when you're paying attention, and you're not interrupting, you're open to more of what people are trying to tell you.
Solomon is the co-founder of a nonprofit called First Help. It's a group that works to raise awareness about police officers and suicide. Solomon is also an author. She wrote multiple books on the subject of law enforcement mental health, and we found several pictures of her speaking at big-time events across the country about police, suicide, and the need for resources to make sure they're taken care of. It's very admirable work, and it makes what we are talking about right now very difficult to comprehend. Now, as far as the victim in this story, and there's still a lot of questions about what happened, but the Worcester Police Union has identified that man found unresponsive in the backyard of the home as Karen Solomon's husband. His name was Kurt Solomon, and he was a 31-year veteran of the Worcester Police Department. And according to WCVB, he was also a dad. He leaves behind 2 adult sons. Now, we don't know what happened between Karen and Kurt, what her role potentially is in all of this. But the truth is, Kurt winds up dead in the backyard of their home. And as soon as police arrive at their house, based off what we can gather from dispatch recordings, they find a bloody trail of evidence.
Looks like from the window we can see that there's much blood and a bathroom inside of the house.
We're standing back here on the deck watching this door.
Yeah, one of you guys need to stay with the victim, and then if one of you guys want to watch the door, just for evidence preservation.
The visible blood inside the building, inside the bathroom, in the back.
Then a few minutes later, as we're listening to the dispatch audio recording, police start talking about a phone number, and that phone number comes back to Karen Solomon. Listen to this.
Thank you.
15, can you just keep trying that number? See if they answer. We just want to know if it's somebody from inside 217 that called, or if it's somebody from a different, like a neighbor or something.
I'll keep trying it. They did say that they work for a resident here.
We see there's no car in the driveway.
I have it. I'll keep trying the number.
Is the caller a male or a female?
It was a female. Her voicemail on her phone says it's Karen Solomon.
Now, it's unclear what the circumstances are surrounding this phone number, how police got it, but this is where it appears they start to eye Karen Solomon as someone who they really need to talk to because she's not there at the home. Now, according to Worcester police, the last time she was seen, and it's unclear which hour, but they say that she was seen walking towards Westcott Street in Worcester, which is north of where she lives. Here's that video once again that was released by police in Worcester. And as we look at it, you can kind of zoom in and we don't see anything in Solomon's hands. But again, it doesn't appear that she's in much of a rush.
We are currently searching for female Karen Solomon, who is presumed to be armed and dangerous. We are actively searching for this person now. We have numerous agencies assisting us.
Now, we don't know what the circumstances are surrounding Kurt Solomon's death. We don't know if there's some sort of confrontation. We do know that police say they just want to talk to Karen Solomon. She's wanted for questioning in connection to the death of her husband. Now, she runs this major nonprofit called First Help that raises awareness about suicide and police officers. And that group, as this story started to grab headlines, not just in New England, but across the country, they released a statement. It says this in part, quote, First Help is aware of the ongoing investigation in Worcester, Massachusetts involving the death of a Worcester Police Department officer in the search for First Help co-founder Karen Solomon. Our first concern is for the officer who lost his life, his family, his colleagues, and the Worcester law enforcement community. We extend our deepest condolences to all those affected by this tragedy. We also recognize the many law enforcement and first responder families who have been touched and supported through First Help's work over the years. We understand that the current circumstances may be deeply affecting members of this community, particularly those who have placed their trust in First Help during some of the most difficult moments of their lives. We remain committed to supporting those families and honoring the trust they have placed in our organization. Joining us now to talk more about this is retired NYPD Detective Tom Smith, also the co-host of the Gold Shield Show. Always great to have you here on Law and Crime. You know, you have the DA and then you have the local Worcester police chief in a news conference yesterday saying that Karen Solomon's potentially armed and dangerous. And on one hand, you want to make sure the public is, you know, aware of what's going on. At the same time, you know, if she is following this and we don't know the circumstances surrounding her husband's death, that still feels like some really strong words to use. What do you make of just kind of that language in a news conference and in announcing what this investigation's about?
Well, it goes to just, you know, being ahead of something. You know, with the crime scene, we don't have too many details about the crime scene, but depending on the cause of death is going to lead to armed and dangerous. You could be armed and dangerous with a knife. You could be armed and dangerous with a gun. You know, was his service revolver, service weapon not in the home? So that may prompt them to say maybe she has it. Or was the injury a gunshot and the gun isn't there? You know, so there's a number of factors that go into labeling a armed and dangerous individual, and a lot of it comes from the crime scene.
Yeah, it's unclear just kind of listening to the dispatch, which you can only, you know, gather so much from, but it's like how many, you know, of these Worcester police officers arrive at this house and they realize that Kurt Solomon, who is a 31-year veteran of that department, was the victim that they were looking at. But from what we can gather, he was found in the backyard. They say that residents found him. Don't know if there's some sort of commotion that led to that. But then you have, it sounds like a trail of blood leading inside the home. Like, as you know, on one part of it, you have the search for Karen Solomon. On the other side, you're trying to figure out what happened. Like, what does that tell you, just with what we know at that point?
Yeah, that's where crime scene investigators come into play. You know, the whole area is going to be cordoned off. No one's going to be allowed in there. And they're going to retrace probably the blood, because that's going to lead to or end up, you know, where the body is. And then you work backwards, you know. So if there is a pool of blood or the blood starts in one particular area of the house, that's going to be pretty much where it happened. And then, you know, you can gather, you know, investigative knowledge of him trying to get out of the house or to a neighbor and then maybe collapsed in the middle of doing that. So that's what they'll deduct as they go through the crime scene and, you know, gather other evidence that's at the crime scene. You know, is there other evidence that's in the house somewhere, in the bathroom, in and around his body? You know, there'd be grid searches, what's called grid searches on the property, of just going step by step in the entire area, you know, to see if there's any other evidence around there.
As far as the search for Karen Solomon, the call came in around 5:30 yesterday morning. she hasn't been seen since. The area where they say she was last seen walking is like 1 block north. So it wasn't like there was a massive radius where they found her, oh, she was last seen on the other side of Worcester. Like, no, she was, just seen maybe like a block away walking. She could get a long way in the 24 plus hours this has been going on. Like where does this search start?
Well, it starts at that home, and then it's going to start with the first Ring camera, which we've done so many shows, Chris, and that's how they're going to do this. They're going to go to every neighbor in that area and try to piece together her route of travel, to a point where it stops. So that's what investigators are going to do. They're going to knock on every single door in that area, every store, every light post that has a camera, everything around there to try to piece together her movements, like I said, to a point where it might stop. And that's where, they're going to be right now. And that's probably how they got the description of what she's wearing from that first camera and first surveillance camera that picked her up. And that, again, may lead to the armed and dangerous part with something in her hand, to prompt them to say that on one of those videos. So, on top of that, Chris, they're going to go to her family. They're going to go to friends. Are there places that she goes to often if she's in trouble? Did she contact anybody? So all of that is going to be part of this investigation / search, for her.
And I'm sure it's harder than it sounds, where how many cases have we talked about where someone's missing and they really only end up being about a mile away, where she could get a long ways in that period of time. But also Worcester is a decently large city. You have to think that there's a lot of cameras. Like now, more than 24 hours later, like going from like the beginning where you're gathering kind of neighborhood Ring cameras. Okay, here's the description. Here's, what she may or may not be carrying. Like, how does the search evolve over a period of time where, she could be, in multiple states by this point if she kept going?
Yeah, that's going to go back to the crime scene. Is anything missing? Is her wallet gone? Is her credit cards being tracked? Can they check them out? And I think a big part of this, where I would start, is definitely her family, because it's just a known thing. When people are in trouble, they're going to reach out to family or friends to explain what happened, to try to get in front of, a bad situation. So, and investigators are not going to give that information out, as much as we'd like them to. It is part of the investigation and is part of the search, and it's going to be held very tight to them. And I understand that, because you don't want any false information out there. You don't want to lead the person you're looking for into a certain investigative role if they're watching the news or they're getting information. But I would certainly, at this point, if the videos come to a stop, the family and friends are going to be a big, big part of this case.
We don't know the circumstances of how Kurt Solomon died. But at this point, Karen is only wanted for questioning in connection to his death. We don't know if there was some sort of confrontation. Was this a self-defense situation? I have no idea what the family history is between this couple. But when you're looking for someone who, could be charged with the most serious crimes we have, could be something where she isn't charged at all and she was a victim in this. We have no idea. Like, how do you handle that messaging that's out there, maybe to family members who she could contact, maybe to the public, and trying to control that, as opposed to just putting it out there and making her seem like she is the suspect, which I know she may be, but at the same time, trying to balance that where you want her alive and in custody to then figure out what happened.
Yeah, that's the slippery slope that police departments go through when they're getting information out there. You don't want to put it into her head, if she is getting information, that you are the person wanted for this crime and you're going to go to jail forever and we're going to get you. If that's not the case, you want to strategically, word it the right way of, hey, she's not a suspect. We need to talk to her about what happened and the circumstances of what happened. But on the same token, she might be armed and dangerous. So you get into, I don't want to say contradicting terms, but it does become a little rough when you start wording, it the right way for the public, for her safety, and for the officers that are looking for her.
Yeah, and I'm sure, I got friends who live in Worcester, and it's like if someone would be capable of taking the life of somebody else and they're running around, in the community, you want to know about that. We'll talk a little bit more about who she is and like the work that she does. But I also would assume, considering, she comes from a family of law enforcement, she herself works with police officers often, and I would just guess that if like she would go to police. Like she knows that that's what you do and you should do in these situations. The fact that she didn't do that, like how does that play in the detective room right now and figuring out what may have played out?
Yeah, you know what? Here's the other part of this, Chris. We don't know. We know her role in the organization that she's involved in and her linkage to law enforcement, but do we really have a whole background of who she is?
Right.
You know, any problem she's going through, any mental health issues she has, and that's where the family's going to come in. You know, this may be a whole nother, ball game when it comes to her mental health that no one knows about yet. You know, so that's going to be part of the questioning of her family. In what state of mind was she in? Any medications, anything like that. So it's going to be an interesting ride with going from the root of just a violent crime to maybe a mental health issue, and then those two things kind of intertwining into this investigation. But if she has family members, you know, that are in law enforcement, they're probably going to assist in a way in this, in maybe trying to find a way to contact her. Does she still have her cell phone with her? You know, a whole bunch of things. So that's why I said getting to the family and friends is going to be so vital with this, because just, again, past history, past experience, she's going to try to reach out to somebody.
Now you're talking, you know, where do you eat for the last
Right.
like 24 plus hours? Where do you go? You know, she doesn't seem like a career criminal, that this is a person who's regularly running from police and might have like I remember we covered the case of the inmates who escaped the prison in New Orleans, and they had this network of people who were helping them out. Like she doesn't come across as the type of person that would have those types of contacts. Like when you're like, what are the mistakes that people make when they are trying to get away from law enforcement? And we don't know if this is some sort of mental health issue that also plays into this, of course, as well. But, you know, when you have someone who is not seasoned at running from the police, like how does that impact the investigation?
Yeah, it does, because you get desperate. You know, hours, you know, you can be out on the run for an hour and it's going to feel like a day. You know, so you start to get desperate, you start to get hungry and tired. And that's where, you know, career criminals, maybe not her, but in the past, other crimes start to be committed. She starts stealing clothes. She'll steal food. She may, you know, other criminals carjack individuals to get out of the area. So there's a whole host of desperate measures that can be taken. Again, we don't know how she is and how resourceful she is, you know, when it comes to stuff like that, or how desperate she is. Desperate people can do very interesting things when they're on the run. So all of that, I guarantee you, when it comes to this investigation, is on the table, and everyone's keeping an open mind about where this could go.
What do you make, and I know you do a lot of work as well, like advocacy work when it comes to members of law enforcement and mental health, and she did very admirable work. There's no question about that, her organization there in Massachusetts. But like it makes this story so shocking and surprising, because it just, like, I remember yesterday, like, and we had her picture from Worcester Police, and it's like you're searching, and then it's like I came across her organization. I was like, this cannot be the same person who we're talking about. In domestic violence, you know, it's not for one particular group of people. It happens in a lot of different ways. Just like, what was your reaction, just kind of seeing who she is, the work she does, and yet here's the situation she appears to be in?
Yeah, it's sad. You know, she's dedicating a part of her life into taking care of law enforcement and their mental health issues, and then something like this happens. But it just shows you how volatile domestic violence is. It can happen to anybody, no matter what you're doing, no matter what role you're in, your organizations or whatever. We've seen celebrities deal with it. We've seen politicians deal with it. We've seen, you know, other law enforcement community members deal with it. So it's just sad. You know, you never want to see someone who's such an advocate for law enforcement, especially on the mental health issue, because that is a tremendous situation that's going on in law enforcement these days. And to have someone that is, like I said, dedicating part of their life to helping that, involved in something like this.
Her husband, the victim in this case, Kurt Solomon, I mean, 31 years with the Worcester Police Department. I'm sure there are people who knew him well who are searching for his wife right now. I'm sure there are people searching for his wife right now who know her and the work that she did. When it comes to any sort of, like, as far as the investigation part of it, and we don't know where this is going to go, but like a conflict of interest because of personal relationships and all of that, because this happened in Worcester, like this is a Worcester Police Department case typically, Like, how could the personal relationships that everybody involved in it potentially play into how the investigation works out?
Yeah, that's, you know what that comes down to, Chris? Leadership. Leadership needs to get everyone in one area and just say, hey, listen, we understand the emotional part of this, but we have to stay professional for a couple of reasons. One, you just have to be professional when you're doing this. Two, at some point down the road, there is going to be a trial. So I've said this on your show so many times, Chris, that the preparation for a trial begins the second those law enforcement officers get to the scene. So you have to be and keep this investigation at a level of integrity because of what's going to come down the line. You know exactly what already the defense attorneys in that area are setting up. You know, that it's a vendetta. They're going after her. It's a revenge thing. Defense attorneys right now are already making a list of what could possibly happen in a trial when this comes to mount the defense, you know, when and if they catch her.
And then just lastly, and this kind of goes back, I just keep thinking of the messaging thing, you know, and I don't know if we're talking about a murder case here, like we'll see how that plays out. But like, how do you coax someone out? And not just in this case, but in a lot of them, where it's like the reality is if she's put in custody, like she may never be a free person again if we're talking about a murder. Like, but you also at the same time, like want this person to not take their own life or something along those lines. Like, how do you coax someone out who's facing the possibility of never being free again, but yet letting them know that that's the right thing to do in this situation?
And that's a great question, Chris. And there's been so many situations with that exact question being asked of law enforcement. And a lot of it has to do with what her response is when and if someone contacts her. You know, if it's, I didn't do it, or it was, he came after me, whatever she says, that's what you kind of have to hone in on. Okay, let's get your story out. We'll take care of this. If it was this, we'll prove it. We'll talk about it. There's so many avenues that conversation can go depending on what she says. You know, right now, everyone has a theory about what happened. That's how investigations start. It's a theory until you get concrete information about what happened, and she's going to hold that key about how you get her in from there. So it's very delicate, and it can go a certain way depending on the state she's in, what the actual story is or what her story is, and going forward with getting her in safely.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens next. Very sad case out of Worcester, Massachusetts. We'll see what happens next. Tom Smith, retired NYPD detective, co-host of the Gold Shield Show. Always great to have you here on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much, Chris.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we are also streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.